Hey, today I'm going to demo how to use the StyleGAN training features inside Runway ML. If you haven't used Runway before, you can log in at runwayml.com, create an account, download the app. It's pretty easy. There's a bunch of stuff that they do with model inference and other things, but today we're going to look at the training section. So you're going to open the app. You'll find there's a training section, which is the third icon down here. So again, this works with just StyleGAN. The thing I should note also is that they're currently in the beta phase of release, so a lot of the UI changes pretty regularly. Like I've seen it change a couple times just in the past week. So I'm not going to talk too much about UI. I'm going to try to talk just about how StyleGAN works and how you can use Runway to train on it. So this is the training section. You'll see here there's a couple examples. This one happens to be mine of how training works in StyleGAN. This one's by Andreas Ref, pretty interesting. So the important thing to remember is that StyleGAN works on being fed a bunch of data, and then it creates fake images based on that data set you give it. So in the case of this, I gave it a bunch of floral images. In the case of Andreas, it looks like it was trained on Danish portrait photos. So again, you have to provide it a bunch of data. One thing to note is that I generally, if you give it a lot of different data, so like say you give it flowers, then animals, and then humans, it's not going to work very well. It requires a pretty narrow data set. So that's one thing to keep in mind is you're going to have to create that data set. I have a bunch of other resources related just to StyleGAN that I'll link to in the comments of this video. But in general, you should know a little bit about StyleGAN before jumping into it because it's pretty important to know exactly how the model works before you get into it. But anyway, let's get started training. So I'm in Runway. I'm going to click here. I'm going to click Start Training. You need to name your training set, so I'm just going to call this a test set. The next thing you need to do is select a data set. So there's a couple of things you can do here. One is you could work off of the pre-existing data sets they have. So there's nebulas, caterpillars, airplanes, graffiti, forests, skyscrapers, mountains. Your other option is to add your own set of images. So the way this would work is if you upload a data set, what you need to do is you need to point it at a folder of images. So I'm going to go over here into one of my folders that I usually use. And let's see what's in here. I think I can use this guy. Yeah, so this is a data set that I usually train on. So inside this folder is just a bunch of PNGs. So you have to point it at the folder. So if you've taken my class with StyleGAN before, you usually have to convert this to a .tf records and do a bunch of other stuff. What's pretty nice about Runway is you don't need to do any pre-processing. So let me show you here real quick. You're going to open this. Okay, well, there's an interesting error message you get. This is because I save them as PNGs, which means they're going to be pretty big. I would resave this as JPEGs, so actually let me just find a different data set to work with. I'm actually going to see if I have one here. Nope, there are none there, so let's just go in here. Cool, so actually let's just use this. This probably won't work as a actual data set to use, but I'm going to show you the upload process. So it's going to take a little while to upload this. So while this uploads, let me tell you a little bit about what we're doing. I create a PNG of a file. This is actually from a video. So it's all the frames of a video. This probably won't train particularly well, but that's fine. And we actually, while this uploads, we can jump to doing a different test. So as you upload this, it's uploading it to Runway's cloud server setup. If you've taken my StyleGAN trainings, you convert these to TF records, and then you run it through the StyleGAN system. Runway takes care of a lot of that for you. So actually, let's just pick one of these different sets and work with it. I'm going to work with this set. Here's a bunch of images. This is actually one that's trained on that you can see in the demo in Runway's app. So let's just pick this. So the next step you're going to do from here is you need to pick what you want to base it on. So there's kind of a funky thing. Oh, interesting. I can just switch to this data set. Okay, that's a bug for those guys that I'll file. So let's just pick this data set. You'll see this is actually just a video. I'm kind of interested to see what this trains to. And let's see. So the next step you need to do is actually pick what you're going to train from. So this is what's called transfer learning. Basically, you take a pre-trained model and you transfer on top of it, and you train on top of it, and it basically speeds up the process a lot more. They're going to default to Flickr Faces HQ, which I definitely recommend is probably the one you pick. This is a high-res model, so it's already 1024 by 1024. You can change to a bunch of other models. So there's Celeb A HQ, which is another common one. There's a bunch of different models here to build from. In my experience, there's not a huge difference between training from one of these or the other. One of the things that's important to know is that each of these has a different resolution. And when you train to that resolution, you can only train up to that resolution. So I think Celeb A HQ is 512 by 512. And some of these are even smaller than that. So if you want 1024 by 1024, you're going to want to pick Flickr Faces HQ. These other ones are going to be smaller, and you can only ever train up to the resolution it's already trained at. So in the case of 512 by 512 for Celeb A HQ, you're never going to be able to train higher than that. So that's an important thing to realize. I hope they eventually sort of make that clear here, because you might have like illustrations of cats, and you want to train it off of cats, and that would work well, and you might get slightly better results, but you're only going to be locked into whatever resolution this is already tied to. So just things to keep in mind. I generally pick the Flickr Faces HQ. So now that we've picked our pre-trained model, the next thing to do is to start training. There are some options over here that I think are worth keeping an eye on. Because I uploaded non-square images, I have an option of how I want to crop stuff. So there's a couple things. There's center crop, which is basically just going to crop to the center of the image. There is random crop, which is going to just start picking different positions within the frames. And then there's no crop. So this is really interesting because it actually adds banding. Maybe that's worthwhile to upload, maybe not. So again, you kind of have a little bit here to pick from. I'm going to pick random crop just because I think I want to see what diversity of these images I can get, because it's a video and it's already like pretty narrow diversity wise. The next step here is training steps. So you can hover over this, you can check it out, but basically training steps is how long it trains for. This is generally going to tell you, again, like I've used the metaphor of baking here. So this is baking. So it'll tell you, like, if you train it for too few steps, you're going to get some weird stuff. That might be good, actually. Up to you. If you train for a long time, it might just be a waste of time. So, like, you could train for, I believe, up to 25,000 steps. At a certain point, you're going to, like, basically not train anything new into it. I generally find, like, for me personally, like 5,000 to 10,000 is about right. This can vary depending on how big your data set is, how different your data set is. Like, there's a lot of different things going into this. What I like and what they've recently added here is actually estimated training time. So Runway charges you by the minute for training. It's currently 5 cents a minute, although I've seen some stuff that say that might change either up or down. I don't know. So it's really important to know that you have enough money in your Runway account to account for that training. So this becomes about $3. It's $3 an hour when you convert it from minutes to hours. So this is going to cost me about $9. So it's really important to know that you have enough money in here, because if you don't have enough money and you burn through your time, it's actually not going to give you a model at the end. It's actually just going to fail, and you won't be able to get anything from it. I think they might be changing that in the future, but it's something to really keep an eye on. So make sure you have enough money over this. I generally have whenever I'm doing training, I generally put about $25 into my account just to make sure that I don't miss it. So it's important to keep that in mind as you do this training. This is a little bit more expensive than server models that I've worked on or that I've told people to use. But what I think is nice is, like, they've built in a bunch of features into this that we'll talk about and look at in a minute. But I think it's actually pretty good. It's a pretty good value for your money. I wouldn't be too worried about the cost of this. So we're all set up here. I'm going to click Start Training. What's going on behind the scenes is it's processing my data set, so it's doing that random crop, and then it's going to spin up the model and start working on this. So it's going to take a little bit of time just to get up and running. What's important to know is I can look at this. I've got another test running here, so we can look at this while it's a mid-model. So there's a couple of things while it's training. First off, you'll see how many steps it's running through. It'll give you an ETA. So again, this is important to keep an eye on for how long it costs. And it'll tell you training. So what's pretty interesting here is that you've got a little scroller. Each of these steps is going to show you different training. You can save these images out if you want to, or not. It's sort of up to you. One thing to keep an eye on is the FID score. So again, inside of StyleGAN, this is like a score that it keeps an eye on. The lower this is, the more likely this is to match to the training data set you have. The higher this is, the less likely it is to look like your training set. So pretty clearly, like, this does not look like what I've trained on. In fact, it's like in this weird stage where it's like half face, half what I'm training on. It looks pretty garish. I've generally gotten the FID score down to about 50 or 60. I've never really gotten it much lower than that. So it's sort of up to you how interested you are in this score. Cool, so this is still training. It's important to know that, like, until you get to that top level, or until you get to this, you won't get a model that you can bring into Runway. So you got to sort of keep an eye on this. What is nice about this is you can shut your laptop and your training will still happen. So even it says here you can close or use the app normally while training. This won't affect your experiment, which is pretty helpful to know. So if you're doing a long run that's going to take 8 hours, shut your laptop or like leave it and come back to it. You're not being charged. Once it hits its final step, it'll stop. You won't be charged for it, so it's all good. You can come back to it a day or two later and it'll be ready for you. So let me show you what a final model actually looks like. So when you're done, you'll see this message that says, hooray, you've trained a model. I'm just going to jump back here to training to sort of show you what you can do with it. So see, I hit the FID score of about 70. This is actually lower at one point, but it's still pretty nice. If you scroll back here, you can sort of see how it trained. I think I retrained this, so actually you won't see the faces. Actually, if I go here, so I actually trained this on flowers. You can sort of see what happens as it trains. You can save out these videos, which is pretty nice. There's a lot of nice features in here to just sort of keep an eye on things. So see the FID score was actually lower than when it ended up when I retrained. So again, that's that case of like, sometimes you need to train things for longer, sometimes you need to train for shorter. You're going to find out on your own end. So we can create this progress video. And you can share that. What I've noticed they've just recently done, so I've got my friend Julie, I've got one that I've been making here. What I've noticed is that you get a little latent space video, which is pretty cool. I'm actually trying to see if I can do this with older models. My guess is I can't, but let's see. Yeah, so this, because they didn't, because I trained this before they released this feature, I don't have this available to me. But there's a cool little latent spacewalk here, which again, I've got code that can do this a little bit longer and a little bit cooler, but like this is helpful to just get started with to see if it's interesting. But once you're done with all this, the really cool thing is you can just bring it into Runway. So I can just open this up and hit Save to My Models, and it's immediately available in this new feature. So if I can add this to a workspace, and now I have this available as its own instance. So now I can use this just like I would any other Runway model. It's pretty interesting. I could actually go through, like I've said, I've got a demo that uses P5.js to do a latent space walk with a little bit more control. So I could go ahead and do this if I wanted to. So that's pretty much it. Like, that's training. It's a pretty cool feature. Like I said, they're making lots of updates to it. So what you see here may be a little different, but the basic steps are already the same, no matter what, for StyleGAN. I know they're also adding new models, so that's some pretty cool stuff there. But in general, I think this is like a really huge feature. And in general, like if you have taken my class or have watched my videos before, I would actually recommend this over the process of uploading stuff to Paperspace, especially if you're not like really comfortable with the command line or with servers or, you know, that sort of thing. I think this covers like the majority of features that I would want to see in a model, and it gives you a decent amount of control without going overboard, and it's just a lot less setup, and it takes care of a lot of things that when you do a custom model through Paperspace, it takes a lot more effort to get set up. So I definitely encourage you looking at this. The Runway guys are great. They're always looking for more features, and they have a Slack channel. So if you're interested in adding comments or just asking for more features, jump in there and talk to them. But that's it for now. If you have any other questions, drop them in the comments.